One of the key measurements that we might want to get when we look at a significant tree is to get an estimate of its height. So to get the actual height, we might need to chop the tree down and measure it, or climb up to the very top and measure it, which I can't recommend. But what we can do is get a fairly good estimate using what's known as the pencil method or the biro method. So what you need is somebody to help you. So Alan is standing next to the tree at the moment, and Alan just tucks right in as close as he can to the tree. Okay, so one of the things that the simplest thing you can do is you can ask Alan his height. Alan, how tall are you?
About 5'11".
5'11". So you know Alan is 5'11". So at the very least you can estimate how many Allens is that tree high. So from here it's about 2.5 times that. So multiply 2.5 by 5'11", convert it to meters if you want, and you've got your height. You can also use the pencil method, which just means using the pencil, stretch out your hand and estimate where on the pencil. The top of the pencil is at the top of Alan's head, the bottom of the pencil is at his feet, or I can put my thumb where his feet are, and then I know that this pen is 1 Allen tall, and I can use that then to go 1, 2, 2.5. I can use this as a simple measuring device, and we know it's about 2.5 times Allen. So that's a very simple, quick, painless method of measuring the height of the tree. One of the other measurements you can take when you're looking at what you think is a significant tree is what's called its DBH, its diameter at breast height. So the reason we're using this height is that it's a common thing that we all have in common, that roughly speaking, it's if you went to hug the tree, that's where you're going to measure its diameter. Okay, to do that, remember its diameter is the distance across the circle. So what we can do is we can measure its circumference and then convert that into its diameter. So one of the ways of doing that is take a very simple measuring tape, pick a point on the tree at around breast height, as I said, pick a point and just keep going around in a straight line. And even if you run out of tape, you can still come back to your starting point. So just mark it with your finger or get a friend to help, and then keep going with the rest of the tape. So that's about 48, 49, plus the first length of tape, which is 150 centimeters, gets you to about 198. And I've done this already, because 198 divided by 3.14 is equal to about 63 centimeters. So you know, if the circumference is 198, you divide it by 3.14, it's always 3.14, that doesn't change, and that gives you about 63 centimeters for the diameter of that tree. The reason that's important is that we can use that as well as the species, which is oak. We can use that diameter plus the species name to put that into a simple website that will give us an estimate of the tree's age. Okay, it is just an estimate, and it will depend on the growing conditions, how healthy the tree is, how healthy the tree has been for its lifetime, and so on. But it is a fairly good estimate of the age of that tree. It's even better than the height. Okay, so that it's the number of, you know, if we cut down that tree, you'd see the rings inside, and you know, lots of people know about counting the rings of the tree. Well, that diameter gives you an estimate of that as well. So that's one of the other measurements you can take quickly and easily and record it as you're looking at your significant trees. One of the key things we'll need you to do as well is to try and identify what type of tree we're looking at. Some of them are obvious, but may not be obvious to everybody. Okay, this is an oak behind me. We can tell that by the shape of the leaves, the fact that there are acorns on the ground, and so on. But if you're stuck, if you can't identify it, if somebody you know can't identify it, there are some really good books that we can point you towards. There's some really good apps and websites. There's apps for your phone that will take a picture of the tree and we'll identify it for you. We'll put those links in a document to go with this video, so you won't be on your own. And if you're stuck after all of that, then come and talk to us and we'll try our best to identify it for you.
The other thing we're looking at is significance factors, and there are three main factors of significance that we would like people to look out for. One of these is the aesthetic value of the tree, whether people think it's a particularly beautiful tree, for example. The other is its biodiversity value. So if people think it's important for biodiversity reasons, like does it support a lot of wildlife? And the other one is its historical or cultural significance. Maybe it's a tree that lots of children in the local area play on, or maybe it was planted by a famous person, or maybe for other historical or cultural reasons that it is significant. So for this specimen here, Owen and Alan are going to speak to us about those three categories and say why they think the tree may or may not be significant under each of the categories. So Alan, you were actually speaking a little bit about this tree's significance already, so I might ask you to elaborate a little bit on the biodiversity angle.
Well, in terms of biodiversity, it's an oak tree, a pedunculate oak, we think. So it's a native species, and oak trees as a native species support a lot of wildlife, a lot of endemic species. We've seen some lichen on the tree already, acorns on the ground, and if you've ever seen a jay around, they're a very colourful bird related to the crow. They'd be feasting on those acorns. So from a biodiversity point of view, oak trees in themselves are very important.
What do you think?
Yeah,
Alan, anything else?
I think it ticks the box from a biodiversity point of view, just about. It is native. It's not a large oak by any means, so there's a limit to how much food and how much it can contribute to the environment. There's a limit to how much carbon it can sequester and so on. But it just about ticks the box, particularly because it's a native tree. From an aesthetic point of view, my own view is that it's not particularly aesthetically pleasing. It clearly has a story to tell, but at the moment it looks a bit shook. So maybe it doesn't tick the aesthetic box, but it certainly ticks the biodiversity box. And the third one is the historic context. Clearly this has a history. It's made a contribution over the years to its environment. It continues to make a contribution. It's an interesting focal point in the community. So it's ticking a couple of those boxes, and I would agree this is a significant tree.
Alan, do you think anything else on those?
Well, I think obviously these categories are all subjective, so it's up to the individual themselves to make the case on whether or not they think a tree is significant or otherwise, and make that argument. Owen has just mentioned the aesthetic qualities, and I suppose if you were being generous, you'd say this tree has a lot of character to it. It's not, classically beautiful, it's not particularly tall and symmetrical. But from the other point of view, I think it does have a quality to it in terms of it looks a little bit broken down. It's decayed. There's only a little bit of it alive yet. I mean, I think that brings a certain aesthetic quality to speak to us about the passage of time and the things that were here beforehand. So as a ruin almost of a tree, I think it does have a good aesthetic quality.
So there you go. People might even think differently about whether it's got beauty or not. It's in the eye of the beholder. So when people are surveying these trees, you may come across other interesting things about the tree that aren't included as part of the survey. So you'll be able to let us know about those things that come up also. So Owen here has noticed something interesting about this tree.
Yeah, I think this tree is interesting for lots of reasons. I think when you're surveying a tree, have a look at the landscape around it. And I think around here it looks as if the ground has been built up around this tree. Maybe when the surrounding houses were being built and so on. So I think this tree may be a bit taller than it looks right now, because I think the ground is built up around it. That's just my suspicion, but I think that's the kind of thing that might be worth noting and adding to a comment section as you're surveying your trees. Exactly the same method applies to measuring this tree as it does to any other tree. It's got a particularly large diameter, clearly. So if you've got a longer measuring tape than I have, that would be great. Where do you measure its diameter? Well, it's at breast height, remember. So I think you've got to get up close to it, and you've got to measure it where it is one distinct trunk, as opposed to trying to measure all of these individual bits that are down at the bottom. So I think something like this is the perfect place to measure DBH right around the tree. As I said, you can even get a piece of rope or string and do it that way, and then measure the piece of rope or string if that's easier as well. From a height perspective, same method applies. Just move backwards, get someone to stand right next to the tree who you know their height, and then do your adding up as you go.
And if you want to discover hidden secrets in terms of the tree's significance, it's worth spending a bit of time with the tree and seeing how many things you can notice. So for instance, down here, we just noticed that there's remnants of what looks like an old stone wall. You could perhaps best describe this old stone wall as being encapsulated within the tree now.
So we'd be delighted if as many people in the community as possible could get involved with this project, looking for the significant trees in Carricktool. And if you'd like to get involved, please get in touch with the local biodiversity group.